You won't believe this, but the night she abandoned her newborn, the church bell rang even though no one had touched it, as if the world itself was warning her that some choices never stop echoing. Years later, she still wakes up hearing that sound, wondering if the baby she left ever felt loved, or if he ever looked up at the sky, asking why his mother walked away. She tries to bury the memory while raising her daughter alone, pretending time can hide shame. But tonight, when the soft knock hits her door, something inside her cracks, because every fear she ever buried is suddenly breathing again. And as she reaches for the handle, her hands tremble the same way they did the night she whispered goodbye on those church steps, knowing the moment she opens it, her past will finally find her. On point. 1, 2. Image prompt. She stands frozen, listening to the echo of that knock as if time itself has stopped breathing. For years, she tried to outrun the night she left her baby behind, convincing herself he had grown up safe, loved, and far from the mistakes she made. But now, with her heart thundering in her chest, she feels the wall between past and present cracking open. She wonders if this moment is punishment, mercy, or something in between. Every fear she buried begins clawing its way to the surface, and she tells herself not to look through the peephole, because once she sees who is out there, she will never be the same again. She pulls in a shaky breath and steps closer to the door, each footfall heavier than the last, as if the house itself is resisting what comes next. Her palms sweat, and she wipes them on her jeans, whispering to herself that whoever is waiting outside can't possibly be the ghost she's feared for 16 years. She tries to imagine a stranger, a delivery, anything but the truth. Yet, something inside her, something old and aching, whispers that she already knows exactly who is standing there, and that she has no choice but to face the consequence of that one desperate night. Her breath catches as she finally leans forward and looks through the peephole, expecting emptiness or danger or anything familiar, but instead she sees a teenage boy standing alone under the porch light. Something electric surges through her as she takes in his face, the curve of his jaw, the shape of his eyes, the undeniable echo of herself in him. She jerks back, stumbling a step as her mind races faster than her heartbeat. 16 years of silence collapse into a single realization she has feared more than death itself. The child she left behind has come home, and he knows exactly where to find her. She grips the wall to steady herself as her knees go weak, because nothing in the world could have prepared her for this moment. She remembers the tiny infant she placed on cold stone, and now here he is, taller than she imagined, older than she is ready to face, waiting with a look that carries years of unanswered questions. Her chest tightens as a wave of guilt washes over her, mixing something sharper, almost hopeful, something she doesn't dare name. She takes one last breath, knowing the next thing she does will change everything, then reaches for the lock as the silence between them grows unbearably heavy. When she finally opens the door, the quiet between them feels sharper than any blade, and she realizes the boy standing there isn't just a memory returned, but a living reminder of the night she lost herself. She searches his face for pieces of the baby she once held, but all she finds is 16 years of questions burning behind his guarded eyes. He doesn't smile, doesn't step back, doesn't soften. He just says her name like it's something heavy he's carried too long, and the sound of it nearly breaks her. She invites him inside even though every nerve in her body begs her to run. But the moment he crosses the threshold, she feels her whole world shift. She knows there's no turning back now, because whatever truth he's come for will demand more courage than she's ever had. He sits at the edge of the couch like he's afraid to touch anything, and she watches him with the careful distance of someone afraid the slightest movement will shatter the moment. He tells her he found adoption papers hidden in a drawer he wasn't supposed to open, that the name on them led him here, and that he spent months building the courage to knock on her door. She listens, breath held, knowing he's choosing every word with the precision of someone holding back a storm. She wants to reach out, to apologize, to explain, but her voice feels locked behind years of regret. Instead, she nods, hoping he can't hear her heart pounding, terrified that he's only here to hear why he wasn't wanted. She asks him gently if he's angry, but the way he looks at her makes her realize the word doesn't even begin to cover what he feels. It's not anger, it's loss, confusion, and a kind of ache she created long before he had the language to name it. He asks why she left him, why she didn't try to keep him, why she made a choice he had to live with every single day. The questions hit her like stones, each one reopening a wound she has never stopped bleeding from. She tries to answer, but her voice cracks, and for a heartbeat she sees something soften in his expression, as if he didn't expect her to break so easily. Still, he waits, needing a truth she isn't ready to give. Before she can answer, Lily wanders into the room, rubbing her eyes, unaware of the storm unfolding in front of her. The boy turns, startled, and Lily freezes at the sight of a stranger in her home. Emma feels her breath catch because this is the moment she's dreaded most, the moment her two worlds collide. Lucas studies the little girl, his gaze shifting from surprise to something sharper, something wounded, as if realizing he wasn't just left behind but replaced. Emma reaches for words, but Lily's innocent voice cuts through the tension as she asks who he is, and the silence that follows nearly tears her apart. He turns back to her, jaw tight, and asks if this little girl knows anything about him. She shakes her head because she never found the courage to explain a past she still can't forgive herself for. Lucas doesn't yell. Instead, his silence feels 10 times louder than anger. He stands abruptly, pacing the small living room like he's trying to outrun the feeling of being second, forgotten, or accidentally erased. Emma steps toward him, begging him to understand that she didn't replace him, that she never stopped thinking about the baby she held only for minutes. But he recoils, eyes full of betrayal he can no longer hide, and she feels the floor drop beneath her feet. She whispers his name, but he's already walking toward the door. She watches him walk toward the door with a heaviness that settles deep in her chest, knowing she has already lost him once, and terrified she is about to lose him again. He pauses with his hand on the doorknob, shoulders tight, as though he's fighting the urge to leave, and the need to stay just long enough to hear something that makes sense. She wants to tell him everything, every fear, every bruise, every night she cried for the baby she abandoned, but the words feel too fragile to survive the space between them. He turns slightly, his face half-shadowed, waiting for an explanation she still can't give. The truth is a storm inside her, violent and tangled, and with each second he waits, it becomes harder to breathe. She opens her mouth, but all that escapes is his name, barely more than a whisper. He turns to face her fully, and for the first time she sees the depth of hurt carried in his expression, a quiet ache that has lived inside him far longer than she imagined. He tells her he spent years wondering if he had done something wrong, if his first breath in this world had been a mistake. She feels her knees weaken at the sound of those words, each one slicing through a wound she has never stopped nursing. She wants to explain the darkness she grew up in, the fear that chased her into that churchyard, the danger that made keeping him feel impossible. But shame coils around her throat, holding her silent. He looks at her, waiting, as if he's giving her one last chance to change what he believes about himself, about her, about the night that broke them both. She gathers her courage, feeling the weight of 16 years pressing against her chest, and finally forces herself to speak. Her voice trembles as she admits she was scared, that she didn't know how to protect him, that the world she lived in back then wasn't safe for either of them. She doesn't tell him everything yet, but she offers a tiny piece of truth, the first honest shard of the story she's kept buried. He listens, jaw tense, eyes searching hers for something real. The air between them shifts, heavy with pain but also with something quieter, possibility. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't look away. But the hurt in his gaze tells her that honesty, even now, comes too late to stop the damage already done. Just as she feels a small crack opening between them, Lily's laughter carries faintly from down the hall, pulling both of their eyes in the same direction. The sound is innocent, bright, completely unaware of the storm in the living room. And it strikes something fragile in him. His posture stiffens again, and she sees the pain rising, the comparison he can't help but make between the daughter she raised and the son she never held. He stands quickly, pacing as though the air has become too tight around him. She watches helplessly as he battles emotions he's never had space to feel. When he finally speaks, his voice shakes with something raw. He tells her he doesn't know how to exist in a family that wasn't built with him in it. She steps toward him, desperate to reach the part of him that still wants answers. But he steps back as though her presence burns. He tells her he needs time to breathe, time to think, time to decide what she means to him now. She nods because she understands, even though her heart feels like it's splitting open. He moves toward the door again. Slower this time, conflicted, glancing back at her with an expression full of hurt and longing. She wishes she could stop him, hold him, fix everything. But she knows this moment is his to take. When he leaves, the door shuts softly, yet it feels louder than any slam. She stands still, the quiet house pressing in around her, knowing the truth she hasn't yet spoken is the only thing that can bring him back. She spends the next hour sitting on the couch, staring at the door he walked through, replaying every word she said, and all the ones she couldn't. The house feels painfully quiet without him, every shadow reminding her of the years she never got to see him grow. When Lily asks if the boy will come back, she forces a smile. But the truth twists inside her like a knife. She knows he's out there trying to make sense of a story he never asked to carry, and all she can do is hope he lets her try again. The weight of what she hasn't told him sits like a stone in her chest, and she realizes that hiding the truth doesn't protect anyone. It only builds thicker walls between them. She whispers to the empty room that she won't lose him again. Outside, Lucas walks aimlessly down the sidewalk, head lowered, hands jammed in his jacket pockets as the night air chills his skin. Every step feels like he's moving farther from the answers he came for and closer to a truth he's not sure he wants to hear. He keeps seeing the little girl's face, the comfort in her home, the safety he never had growing up, and the contrast burns deeper than he expected. He wonders what made him the child she couldn't keep, and why she chose a different life for the daughter she raised. His breath fogs in the cold air as he tries to swallow the jealousy he didn't want to feel, the hurt he can't hide, and the fear that maybe he was never meant to belong anywhere. Back home, Emma can't sit still anymore. The silence feels suffocating, and every passing minute makes her chest tighten with the fear that he might not return. She moves through the house like a restless ghost, opening windows, closing them, checking the door as if he might magically appear. Lily watches her with quiet confusion, sensing something heavy, but not understanding its shape. Emma kneels beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear, and promises that everything will be okay, even though she doesn't believe it herself. When Lily hugs her, small arms wrapping around her waist, she feels the warmth she clung to for years. But tonight it isn't enough to soothe the ache of the son she lost and just barely got back. Meanwhile, Lucas stops near the edge of a small park, leaning against a cold metal swing set as his emotions finally crash over him. He remembers every birthday he spent wondering who he looked like, every school project that asked for family history he couldn't give. Every night he imagined a mother who wished she'd kept him. Now he knows she existed, and she's nothing like the stories he told himself to cope. She's real, scared, broken, and trying. And that truth hurts more than the stories ever did. He sinks onto the swing, gripping the chains as he tries to untangle the hurricane inside him. Part of him wants to go back. Part of him wants to run. And part of him realizes he's standing on the edge of a choice that could change both of their lives. When Lucas finally returns to the house, The porch light is still on, as if she kept it lit just for him. He hesitates before stepping closer, heart pounding at the thought of facing her again. Inside, Emma hears footsteps and races to the door, swallowing the fear that he came only to say goodbye. He stands there, eyes tired and conflicted, and she sees the storm still lingering in him. Before she can speak, he asks the question that breaks her completely. Was he a mistake? The words hit her like a blow, and she shakes her head fiercely, tears gathering, wanting to scream that he was the only thing that ever made her believe she could be more than her past. She takes a breath because she knows it's time. The truth she's avoided for 16 years rises to her lips, ready to destroy or save them both. She takes a slow breath, feeling the past clawing up her throat, and knows she can't hide anymore. He stands there waiting, hurt carved into every line of his young face, and she realizes the truth is the only thing that can keep him from slipping away again. Her voice trembles as she begins to speak, not with excuses, but with the fear she carried as a terrified teenager who had no one to protect her. She tells him she wasn't ready, not because she didn't love him, but because the world around her was dangerous and cruel. She feels her body shake as memories she's buried for years break their way out, and for the first time she lets herself be fully seen. The air grows thick with tension and heartbreak as she speaks, but she forces herself to keep going, knowing every word is a step toward the truth he deserves. She tells him about the boy she was, 16, scared, trapped in a house filled with shouting and slammed doors, living with a man who hurt her more than he ever cared for her. Lucas's eyes widen slightly, the anger in them shifting into something more fragile as he listens. She explains how she hid her pregnancy, terrified of what would happen if anyone found out. Terrified of the man who promised to destroy her if she ever tried to leave. Her voice cracks as she describes sneaking out in the middle of the night, clutching him close, running through the dark with nowhere safe to go. Lucas doesn't speak, but she can see the storm inside him quieting, replaced by a kind of stunned understanding as he realizes her silence wasn't rejection. It was survival. Her memories spill out faster now, years of fear finally breaking free. She tells him how she ended up at the church, clutching him so tightly. Her arms ached, hoping someone kind would find him and keep him safe from a world she couldn't escape. She admits she stayed hidden nearby, watching from the shadows as a woman opened the door and lifted him gently into her arms. The image has haunted her ever since, both her deepest heartbreak and her only moment of peace. Lucas listens, still as stone, his breathing slow and uneven. For the first time, he sees her not as the woman who left him, but as a girl forced to choose between two kinds of impossible. The truth settles heavy between them, painful but real. And he doesn't look away. The weight of her confession pulls her to her knees before she even realizes she's sinking, and Lucas stares at her as if seeing a version of her he never imagined. Fragile, remorseful, human. She tells him she has carried the shame every single day, that she has lived in fear of this moment, and prayed for a chance to make it right. Her voice breaks as she admits she never stopped loving the baby she carried through the darkness. The baby she was forced to let go so he could have a life she couldn't give. Lucas's jaw trembles, and for the first time since he arrived at her door, the anger in his eyes softens into something wounded and uncertain. He takes a small step forward, torn between staying guarded and letting her pain touch him. She lifts her gaze to him, her voice barely more than a whisper as she says he was never a mistake, that he was the only good thing she had in a world that kept breaking her. Lucas's expression trembles, his guard cracking under the emotion he's fought for years. He kneels slowly, meeting her at eye level, his breath unsteady, as if he's standing on the edge of a cliff he's afraid to leap from. The truth she shared has shaken him, leaving him raw and unsure, but also closer to her than he has ever been. For a long moment, they simply breathe in the same space, two broken halves finally facing the wound between them. He doesn't forgive her yet, but for the first time he doesn't pull away. And in that small, fragile moment, she feels the first flicker of hope. The night settles into a heavy quiet as they move inside, both unsure of where to place their hands or their thoughts. She brings him to the living room, the same space where hours earlier he sat like a stranger, terrified to touch anything. Now he sits slowly, almost cautiously, as if the furniture remembers the tension still lingering between them. She watches him with a softness she hasn't allowed herself in years, feeling a small shift inside her, something warm and frightening at the same time. He avoids her eyes at first, staring at the floor, as though the truth she spilled onto the porch is still too heavy to lift. But she knows he's here because something in him wants to understand, wants to try, even if he can't say it yet. The fragile hope growing between them feels delicate, like a spark floating in darkness. She sits across from him, giving him space, and begins to tell him what happened after she left him at the church. How she escaped that dangerous house, how she slept in a shelter for weeks, how she worked 3 jobs just to survive. Her voice stays steady, not with pride, but with a kind of exhausted honesty she has never shared with anyone. Lucas listens, jaw tight but eyes softening, as the puzzle pieces of her life start fitting together. He never imagined her carrying so much alone, never thought of her as someone who had to fight for her own safety. The more she speaks, the more he sees the truth he never expected. She didn't abandon him out of coldness, but out of desperation. And though he doesn't say it, something inside him begins to ease, one small breath at a time. After a long silence, Lucas stands and walks toward the window, staring out at the dark street as if trying to see the past she described. When he finally speaks, his voice is soft, almost fragile, admitting that a part of him believed she never thought about him again. She feels the confession hit her like a wave, because it's the one fear she knew he would carry. She rises slowly, stepping toward him but not too close, wanting to give him the choice. She tells him she thought about him every day. On birthdays she didn't get to celebrate, on nights when she cried herself to sleep, on mornings when she wished she had been braver. He turns toward her, eyes glimmering with something heavy and new, realizing the grief he felt growing up was something she felt too, just in a different, lonelier way. Later, unable to sit with the weight inside him, Lucas quietly asks if she would take him to the church, the place where everything started and ended all at once. She nods, her heart tightening at the thought of returning, but knowing he needs it more than she fears it. The drive is silent, filled with unspoken emotions pressing against the darkness outside the windows. When they arrive, the church looks smaller than either of them remembered, worn by time yet still standing like a witness to choices that changed their lives. Lucas steps out slowly, shoulders tense, eyes scanning the steps where he was once left beneath the cold night sky. Emma watches him, her breath unsteady, praying the moment gives him clarity rather than pain. The night feels sacred, like the past has finally come to meet them. Lucas approaches the steps slowly, each footfall heavy with the weight of a lifetime he never understood until now. He kneels, touching the stone where his life was reshaped, feeling both anger and gratitude twist together in ways he can't separate. Emma stands behind him, afraid to breathe, watching the boy she once ran from finally face the place where she lost him. When he turns to look at her, his eyes are full of questions and pain, but also something softer, something like understanding. She kneels beside him, tears gathering as she whispers that she wishes she could go back and choose differently. He doesn't answer right away, but he doesn't pull away either. In the quiet night, with the church towering above them, the space between mother and son begins to fill with something they've never shared before. The possibility of healing. The ride home is quiet, but for the first time, the silence isn't sharp or heavy. It feels open, like a space waiting to be filled with something new. She watches him from the corner of her eye, noticing how his shoulders sit a little lower, how his breathing is calmer, How the anger that once hardened his features has softened into something almost fragile. When they pull into the driveway, he doesn't rush to get out. Instead, he sits for a moment, staring at the warm light glowing through the living room window. She wonders if he's imagining the life he never had here. The birthdays, the laughter, the quiet mornings. But when he finally looks at her, there's a question in his eyes, not of accusation, but of possibility. She feels her heart lift, cautious but hopeful, sensing that maybe, just maybe, he's ready to step toward her instead of away. Inside, the house feels different. Warmer, alive, almost expectant. Lily wakes from a light sleep and wanders out, rubbing her eyes, startled to see Lucas standing there again. This time, he doesn't flinch or look away. Instead, he offers her a small, unsure smile that seems to surprise them both. Lily steps closer, curious and unafraid, whispering a soft hello. Emma watches the moment unfold like a fragile miracle, her heart swelling as her children, one she raised, one she lost, stand facing each other for the first time without fear. Lucas shifts awkwardly, not knowing how to exist in this space yet, but he doesn't step back. And for the first time, she can imagine a world where the two of them grow into something more than strangers bound by shadowed history. They sit together in the living room, the air filled with a gentle awkwardness that feels like the beginning of something real. Lily chatters softly, telling Lucas about her favorite cartoons and the drawing she made earlier, and he listens with a careful politeness that slowly melts into genuine interest. Emma watches them from across the room, her heart swelling at the sight of her son and daughter sharing the same couch, the same space, the same moment. The sight feels surreal, something she dreamed of but never dared to believe could happen. Lucas glances at her occasionally, each look carrying a quiet message. He's trying. He's staying, and maybe he wants to know what it feels like to belong here. The fragile threads between them stretch slowly, forming the first shapes of family. Later, after Lily drifts back to sleep and the house grows quiet again, Lucas stands near the doorway, as though deciding whether to leave or stay longer. Emma approaches slowly, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to disturb the fragile peace they've only just begun to weave. He looks at her, his expression steady but vulnerable, and tells her he doesn't know how to forgive everything yet, but he wants to try. The words hit her with the force of a lifetime, filling her with a warmth she hasn't felt in years. She nods, not trusting her voice, letting tears slip down her cheeks in quiet gratitude. He steps closer, just enough for her to feel the closeness she once dreamed of, and for a moment they share a silence that feels sacred, healing, whole. They walk to the front door together, the same door where he once stood as a stranger returning from a past neither of them could outrun. Now, they stand side by side, no longer bound by silence but by a fragile courage that feels like the beginning of something new. Before he leaves, he pauses, turning back to look at the home he stepped into full of anger and confusion. His voice is quiet when he tells her that he'll come back tomorrow. She nods, her heart swelling with the promise held in those simple words. As he steps into the night, she watches him with a tenderness that fills every hollow space inside her. The door closes not with loss, but with hope, because for the first time she knows he will return, not as a ghost, but as her son.